Okay, so let's start. So I have this stupid introduction that was made for. I like stupid introductions. So, welcome to my talk. I present this because gaming is cool, retro gaming is trendy, and more importantly, arcade games are fun. So I made a really funny picture because everybody needs really funny pictures. But bullet points and memes are maybe not the best way to talk about old school arcade games. That's better. That's how I like them. Puts us better in the mood. Okay, so you start with hacking hardware, but not everybody knows that. Then you program some emulators. Not everybody knows that, but everybody knows that the result is a good game. And that's a good thing about emulation, is that you start with hacking, not everybody understands that, can do that, but in the end you get games. So it brings games to everybody. It also re-enables games that were lost. We'll talk about that later. But on the other hand, you have plenty of people who just want to play games for free, who gives a lot of clueless comments. Anyway, that's a bit like jailbreak, basically. It's hacking that is beneficial to anyone, which has its pros and cons. Okay, so today I will talk about arcade games. So those were those games that you had to put money in a bar to play with. And so basically the games had to attract you to put some money in one game and not the other. And also importantly, the money you will put will go in the pocket of the arcade operator, not in the manufacturer. So basically, to be successful, arcade games had to be awesome. And to be awesome, usually, they had to be different, so dedicated. So the person doing the games were usually it was dedicated software, dedicated hardware. Here we even have dedicated cabinet with dedicated controls, 4 directions, no buttons, as opposed as a generic hardware of a console and a controller which has a bit of the controls for all kinds of configuration, different kinds of game and everything. So basically, important word for arcades were dedicated. So if we look at this, we can notice 2 important things. So first, the horse disappeared before being hit, but also the ray of light is not regular. There's a kind of bug here. This is because those hardware could not display directly on screen. Instead, all the graphics were cut into tiles, and then you just send to the graphic CPU the number of the index of the tile and the coordinates, and there was a dedicated chip that would render the graphics of any frame. So basically, it makes the frame rendering really reliable and extremely fast. But on the other hand, you cannot draw something new and different on the screen. So you also see that in old school some consoles, but definitely that's not how computers were working. Oh, I know that this cup. She's pregnant. You'll explain to her why. The pregnant MRNCD cup. So basically, arcade hardware were often dedicated. The exception being that some arcade hardware, like the Naomi, Chihiro, and Triforce, were based on powered-up conversion of the console, but it's more an exception than the norm. So now if we look a bit in history, and if we look at this game, Night Driver in 76, one of the first racing game, is actually based on a German game. The first racing game is German. Nürburgring, sorry for the pronunciation, in 1975, and it was actually made of 20 PCBs for the first racing game. And well, they just adapted, make it simpler, but when it was one PCB, that shows you the effort in all cases. This was anyway a dedicated hardware just for that game. And another example to be different was Berserk, 82, I think, was one of the first game with a speech synthesis. It cost $1,000 per word. to be digitized. So just to make something different and new, then a lot of investments and especially it was important, sound was important in the arcade room, and the coins detected in the pocket is something to be remembered. And they also made this. Cycling, They made a German version, and the story doesn't say if German words are more expensive to be digitized because they tend to be longer. Battlezone, the first FPS in 1980, was not even supposed to be a game originally. It was supposed to be a training device for the military. Dragon's Lair, 1983, was an interactive cartoon running on the Laserdisc, so this huge disc, much like compact disc, but much bigger. And the technology was just 1 year old. And actually, the technology was not ready for that. But it was wearing down the drives because they had to change the scenes often. But at least they took a very recent technology and they made it in something unbelievably cartoonish because games at the time had like 16 colors. The other kind of games had 16 colors. Oh yeah, the hard disk at the time were 10 megabytes. Roughly. Outrun was awesome. Outrun needs to grow 2 roads at a time, so it was really running on dedicated hardware. And so 2 PCBs, 2 main CPUs, so 2 CPUs each more powerful than the central CPU of an Amiga. And one of the CPUs dedicated to drawing roads. And for hints, the roads is actually running half slower, so 30 frames a second, while the rest is running 60 frames a second. So even for that, to bring this display, they cheated a bit. They brought out a new CPU. The result was awesome, but the hardware was awesome too. Hard driving. So hard driving, now it's before we had GPUs that were handling everything in the 3D. Hard driving was awesome. The initial hard driving in 89, was already 3 PCBs. The sequel was 4 PCBs. And then last month, this version was emulated. So 3 screens of hard driving with extra PCBs. So we are 6 PCBs, 4 CPUs, 9 DSP for this game in 1981. 1991. This game has an amazing ability that you can add more monitors if you want, up to 25. And one guy has so you can plug extra monitors. So the central monitor is medium res and the other monitors are low res. But you can add more monitors as long as they have their own extra video PCB. And you can plug, and this guy created 5 of them, but you could actually put more of them, up to 25. And there's actually non-dumpty and not emulated yet, police trainer, so a real training device for police forces that was based on this hardware, and the official hardware for this had 5 screens. So we are in 1995, multi-display, and this was emulated just last month. I did the recording of that one. It runs on a PC. This one with the 9 DSPs and for 4 CPUs, maybe it won't run on a decent PC. I'm not sure, but yeah. It's really impressive what they could bring for games, to make a difference. And sometimes it was not just the electronic, but it was the cabinets. So you had all kinds of sports, so biking, canoeing, and so on. And this is Aspoking. The controller is this hand here with the black finger. This is Korean. Yeah, don't ask me. Yeah, but you see, extreme dedicated controllers. Let's say. Sometimes it's the cabinets. So the famous Sega R360 would rotate the player on all axes, even upside down. So it was mostly for Afterburner and then I think Strike Fighter. Or sometimes it was the screen that was awesome. So here you have extra widescreen, so 2 widescreen next to each other. You can see in the background that's a triple screen, so that gives you an idea of how the view was wide. Or here you have hemispherical. You're really in the game, and you cannot even see the whole game, even if you turn your head. Like there's something happening in every direction. But it makes a decent looking 3D wise game really feeling really awesome when you're like in the game. It's really so once again making a difference in a way or another. Of course, with those awesome games came an awesome level of piracy, and as long as the games were not completely crazy, electronic-wise or cabinet-wise, then there was piracy. The first bootleg version is Circus from XCT. It's 76 game. So you see the hardware is pretty old, but they're already a bootleg. Typically, a bootleg would just disable the protection, sometimes patch the name of the company, but not go further. There are a few exceptions, and actually there are so few that I could get most of them. So those are games that had a bootleg with a modified title. So I like that the Space Invader, which was a text title, has a bootleg as a Darth Vader with a graphical title. Then there are some nice tricks like Metal Slug 3, the bootleg of Metal Slug 3 being Metal Slug 6. That's a nice way to create a new version. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, the same game, Phoenix, had plenty of of different titles or even typos or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Super Plus instead of King of Fighter 2001. That's makes it look pretty awesome, but yeah, it's the same thing. Okay, so but sometimes they would go further than just patching the protection and maybe at best patch the graphics. Yeah, Xevious is also quite nice. Xevious is the original one, and they removed the letter for the bootleg. I'm not sure it makes sense, but probably it did make sense to them. Okay, but sometimes, also in very rare case, instead of to create a new game without having to work too much, then they would create fake games. So basically, you maybe haven't heard about Dragon Ball, even if the graphics look similar, but it's just a patched version of Ninja Gaiden. All the graphics have been patched. So this game was good, so basically that gives you a good game by just creating new graphics. And you can play with trends. So for example, Snow Bros. 3, it creates a football that was the time of the World Cup, and this is actually just a hack of Snow Bros. 1. But sometimes they also mix the levels, so the first level of one is not necessarily the first. It's not so easy. And of course, there is this bubble with girls in the background. I'm not sure there's a point, but definitely Bubble being a good game. Okay. Sometimes they would try the opposites. They would rip graphics from StarCraft to make a shooting game. Or they would rip graphics of King of Fighter and Street Fighter to make it a new game, but usually those games are crap. But they are just funny to see a shooter with the graphics ripped from StarCraft. It doesn't really make sense to me, but yeah. So, of course, with awesome piracy came awesome protection. And once again, the protections, the arcade hardware were made by people who wanted to do dedicated things, so they could have dedicated protection. So the famous ones like the Atari Pokey was already used for the sound. So you would lose the protection, part of the, at least maybe the RNG and the protection and the sound, without the chip. So like a part of the game would be missing. The Atari Slapstick was here a protection device, pure protection device for ROM bunking. So the game would crash, and maybe it would be difficult to defeat that. But once you can see the ROM bunking is working, then the whole game works. And the problem, some of those protections are still not completely defeated now, because in this case they were they were completely integrated with the game's mechanics. A nice one to mention also is this Alpha A201. So it's a bit like the NES CIC chip. So it's a 4-bit chip with a polynomial EIP. So it's really an old chip. We are talking about 1982 here. But this CPU was running code to create a virtual CPU. So it was a virtual CPU implemented in hardware in 1982. So when someone say, "Oh, virtual machine," yeah. And those were also dedicated chip sometimes dedicated for one component. Oh yeah, Bubble will come next. Sometimes here it was also used for sound. So as I said, this one is still, so Raiden 2 is using this chip. It was only emulated playable this year, but the next games using this chip more intensively with the more advanced function are still not emulated as of now in 2014. So in this case, tightly integrated with the game mechanics. Here are a few examples. In Dodonpachi, there is an ARM dedicated core for the protection, and if this ARM core is absent, then the game works, but the enemy don't shoot. So you cannot kill, you cannot die. It makes the game a bit boring. And also there's no combo. There's no combo bar. Here you have it, and here it's gone. But the game works. But just the part of the game is gone, and you cannot really, it's not a bit to flip because there's one core missing. In Hang-On, the second CPU is used for the road, and it's sometimes encrypted. So if the CPU is missing, then the roads are straight, which makes it quite boring. And also, very often with Konami, the collisions are handled by the protection chip. So if it's not correctly emulated, like here it's not working, and here you cannot kill and you cannot be killed. So this makes protection much stronger because you may have an extra functionality at the end of the game. The typical way to emulate those protection was there was no only choice to decap the chip. So here this chip specifically PS4, nice name, for Bubble Bobble in 86, so PS4 in 86. And the only possible way to get them emulated perfectly was to just decap the chip and read all bits manually. There were some nice bootlegs that were done by bootlegging the chip, by blackboxing the chip. But in extreme case, because the protection chip would be used for RNG and secret bonus and this kind of thing, then experienced gamer would see the difference that something is missing or anything. I think I think this chip even could read the joystick position, so maybe the RNG was also depending on that. And of course, by blackboxing, yeah, maybe if you blackbox the chip, you forgot to move the joystick and so on. So basically, this Bubble Bobble was not emulated correctly until like this chip was decapped and read, and it was in 2005 or something. Basically, there were bootlegs, but never perfect ones. So good protection that lasts really long. And then they decided to step one level higher, and they decided to avoid dumping the protection data. Then you put the data on a RAM, and this RAM is battery powered. So this is called suicide batteries, because when the battery runs out, the memory is cleared and the protection is gone. Very nice. In the first chip that was using the suicide battery, you don't even have a way to open it. So you don't even have a way to replace the battery inside. But even in the CPS2, like a broad one, they don't even tell you in the operator manual that there is a suicide battery inside. And they don't even let you open the hardware yourself without voiding the guarantee. So on CPS2, you have stickers on some security stickers that you cannot peel off without leaving a mark. And you also have a security nail, so it's just a small nail, but it's one of the piece to remove is, the head is really brittle. So it's really difficult to remove it without showing that you removed it on purpose. So, and of course security screws, but basically you're not supposed to open it, without voiding the guarantee, and it's gonna die anyway. Very nice. Also the little wire here, that if you open it the wrong way, gone. And sometimes it's actually get even more crazy. So protections with the data saved on the battery powered RAM, but also this one would actually kill itself on purpose if you do something like the voltage goes low or something. That's the Capcom Tornado for the CPS3. CPS3 was fragile, probably because of that. It would kill itself on purpose. I mean, other chips do that, but this one was known to be really nasty. I mean, paranoid. And it already had used a custom SH2 for the CPU. So like, I have encrypted all codes, but I also have a suicide battery, and I kill myself on purpose. Well, the hardware was known to be fragile. So yeah, maybe that's a consequence. But yeah, that's really how these protections, the level of paranoia of these protections, and some of them were really difficult to defeat. And sometimes they would also use some some commercial protection chips, so like the Dallas 502, which has the self-destruct input pin. So once again, the pin that you set high, it clears its memory, it clears its encryption key, and you can it will happily wipe itself, because this chip was made to be used in a banking device. So it makes sense. These chips were customs. This one is commercial. The positive thing is that if, like the manufacturer of this game, you provide the actual original ROM to upload and will encrypt it itself when uploading and so on, then even if your game is dead, you can re-upload it via the standard pins with the software provided by it doesn't allow you to dump it once it's uploaded, encrypted and everything, but at least it's a way to recover this yourself by taking the official ROM. But this ROM was once again not dumped by someone. It was provided by the original manufacturer. Now that they stopped commercial activity. So yeah, self-destruct input is not uncommon for devices, but I mean, it's just a game. And if you have it at home, the battery runs out, the game just dies. So yeah, that's the level of paranoia. I better kill myself than letting you play the game for free. I mean, not for free now, you bought it. It's even more sadistic than that. And this sets the interesting question. Basically here you have a CPS2 battery that leaked and killed the motherboard. These games will die. These games some of them are paranoid, but you have the game, and at some point the manufacturer will stop supporting them. So you're not supposed to open them, security, voiding guarantee, but after, these games are just lost for everybody because the last of this game in a working state will stop working, the battery will run out, and this game will be lost, just not for the manufacturer for commercial opportunities, but also for everybody, for the history of video games, I would say. So basically, hacking is the only way to preserve those games, because even the manufacturer were not able to hack they didn't want to create a non-protected version of the game. So basically, these games would be lost if no one hacks them. And now that some of them were hacked, then it enables people to actually, based on emulation, provide now new versions of these games based on emulation. So that's why companies would let people hack their old school games, because then someone else can reuse emulation to provide them. And in any case of these remakes, the original IP owner will get its share of money. So that's also why it's fine as long as you didn't bother them at the time commercially. And of course, with the modern times, they go a bit too far and they provide DLC for nothing. So for $1, you can get a different looking cabinet. But here you see the room, the virtual room you're playing in. It looks crap because you can also buy a virtual room. So just $1 for just to have different cabinets or another $1, and you don't have all the characters. I don't think it makes sense, but that's modern times, DLCs everywhere just for It's not expensive, but does it make sense? And why not providing from the beginning? Yeah, I don't know. It's like growing in Mario. You have to pay to get a mushroom. So just a summary for this part, that arcade games were running on dedicated everything. They were pirated because they were still awesome. So because of the awesome piracy, they were awesomely protected. And that made them, in many cases, vulnerable, not in terms of exploitation, but vulnerable to time, and they would be lost if no one hacks them to preserve them. Taking a break there. Any question? No? I don't know. Sure. Okay, so this part, yeah. You can get this part. Yeah, actually, this is going to be a long day.
But pirating such a game would mean that you have to develop your own hardware for the game as well.
No, first it's you buy the game. So when games were sharing the hardware, you buy the most common game and you put the most expensive, most rare game on the same hardware. They had anti-game swap and anti-region, like they were cheaper in Japan. But you couldn't run the English version on Japanese hardware. So region swap first, game swap, and then sometimes they would reproduce the hardware or something. But if you have a brand new game, some of this hardware lasted 10 years. If you take a 10-year-old board and you just replace the chip and you have the games that was just released last month, you still get some money by just game swapping and everything. So it's not always that they try to reproduce their hardware, but sometimes, yes, they did. And they did it pretty well. Some of these bootlegs were running and sometimes on completely different hardware. Sometimes they even it's very impressive how much they were able to mimic a game but the CPU was different on this kind of thing. Yes. Some of the bootlegs are admirable. Yeah, of course, many of them are just the same thing. So, let's look at one of the hardware, the Capcom Play system, which is known usually as the CPS-1. You probably know this game for this. Street Fighter II in 1991. So, the original Street Fighter 2, the Champion Edition, the Turbo, Hyper Turbo, some shooters, 1941. This one is good because the times you're a Japanese mercenary and the boss is a B2. In the sequel, B2s are not the bosses anymore, and now it's a tank with 3 legs. Not sure how that works physically. CPS1 was awesome. You can walk in pants in the forest. You can jump on walls. Punch T-Rex and kick pterodactyls. Fight with laying dragons. Standing dragons. And flying dragons. Or flying big objects, like Kingpin. Conquer Russia. This is supposed to be the Duma. Conquer China. Or some more peaceful games. So, CPS1 was really good. Plenty of great games. This one is worth mentioning, Kensei Mogura. Probably never heard about it. It was emulated 6 months ago. And there's a reason for that. I mean, it really looks like Street Fighter 2 with a twist. Well, at least it's Street Fighter 2. Now it's Kensei Mogura because it's a mole-hitting game in the Street Fighter 2 environment. So it's just the mole-hitting game with CPS1 for the graphics. So you just hit moles and so on. But the heads have the heads of bison. And it's extremely rare. And it was restored and emulated 6 months ago. So yeah, at least probably one of the most rare CPS1. I mean, I'm not sure it qualifies as a CPS1, but it's using the genuine CPS1 hardware and a small motherboard for the moles handling. Emulated just 6 months ago. So CPS1 was protected, but it was hacked, and it was completely hacked, like those Street Fighter 2 hacks where you switch characters and have extra abilities and everything. For Final Fight in 89, that's an original game with 3 characters. And that's the bootleg, where you can even control some of the bosses. So really advanced bootlegs that try to bring really new stuff. And this is the original CPS1 with 1, 2, and a little 1 motherboards, PCBs. It's not really a motherboard, this one, but anyway. And this is a bootleg where the hardware is completely different. So even this is actually a Street Fighter 2 bootleg. So like not only the game was pirated, but the hardware is completely redone, and the manufacturer would not get any money. So basically, Capcom tried to follow the rules, the usual rules of the time, and this is the latest version of. This is used in the latest version of the CPS1, the Dash CPS1, and this is a custom chip with encryption. This is a Z80 with a custom encryption and a suicide battery. So following the custom encryption, custom chip, suicide battery, the encryption was weak. They could do plain text attack on the data because code and data were encrypted together, and basically the protection was completely broken. And even the CPS1 Dash games had their bootlegs with that's probably Punisher in Chinese. So CPS1 was great. It was protected, increasingly protected, but it was completely hacked, not protected enough, even if at the end it had suicide battery, custom chip, and everything. So the answer for that was the CPS2. Put mine here. This is actually a photo of mine. And the CPS2 was roughly the same thing as the CPS1 hardware-wise. So CPS2 started in 1983 with Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, just exactly like... and so from Super Street Fighter 2 in 93 until Hyper Street Fighter 2 in 2003. Original. So, the Super Street Fighter 2, the really good Turbo Edition, the first really good games, Hyper Street Fighter 2. So you could just have different variation of the same character. So like here you have 2 different versions of Chun-Li. And also the Alpha series. 1, 2. Alpha series had this 2 versus 1 mode, which was really awesome. Very, very, very fun. Also the parody, which I really like, Pocket Fighter, with plenty of jokes, weirdness, and everything. And the first Marvel games with the crossovers, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes. This one, Marvel vs. Street Fighter. This is a secret character based on the Japanese comedian. And a very good Marvel vs. Capcom. Really, really good games. Also the very good Darkstalker series. 1, 2, 3. And some also great action games. Forward Guild, Armored Warrior. The very good Alien vs. Predator. Dungeons and Dragons. And some shooters. 1986. 1944. Dimahu. I like it. It's not so well known, but I like it.
What was the name?
This one?
Yeah.
Dimahu.
Oh.
It's a made-up name because it's definitely a Japanese name. The Japanese title is completely different. Giga Wing. And Mars Matrix. In Pro Gear. And this is the boss of stage 2. This is a cave game.
Yeah, Cave is known for that.
And I played without cheating. So you just have a tiny pixel here making the head of the pilot making you vulnerable. Just in case you want to play. This is the first round. If you play the second round, it's harder. They have new patterns. And also some peaceful games compared to the other. Mighty Pang. There's a loop. And Puzzle Fighter. CPS2 was awesome. Really, really good games. And yeah, so it was really the successful successor of the CPS1. CPS1 here, CPS2 is here. CPS3 was a failure, fragile, too difficult to program. CPS3 didn't have any third-party developers, while CPS1 had, and CPS2 also. So CPS2 was the last successful hardware from Capcom. CPS2 was really great. And CPS2 was absolutely unscathed. That's the list of bootlegs, hacks, and region swap and everything bypass that you had for CPS2. CPS2 was absolutely unscathed. They were so desperate that they couldn't hack CPS2 that because they were not able to make an arcade hack of this game, then they took the Mega Drive version. They took a Mega Drive version and they make an arcade version out of it. So they patched the title to say insert coin, but they made a typo. Yeah.
Instant coin.
Yeah. So they couldn't hack the original CPS2, so they just say, "Oh, let's hack the console game into an arcade game, and no one will notice the difference." So CPS2 was unscathed. So let's look at the hardware. I brought one here. So you have a sandwich of 2 PCBs. So basically, one PCB. Yeah. So can I show you to the camera or not really? You're not sure.
Should work.
So it's made of a sandwich of 2 PCBs. One is specific to the system, so you don't have to buy a new one for other games, and one is specific for the game. And it turns out I brought one of the game that actually use 2 PCBs for the game itself, so that's like 3 PCBs. I show you this in the camera still, it's a good example. That's a game. And this part are the standard chip, like you have the sound chip and whatever, the Q sound. And so that's the system chip, the system PCB. And then you have the game itself, the part of the game. So you have, let's look, we'll see that later in the picture. But you have the chip, the ROMs, the two-side battery, and actually the extra PCBs for that game, and not so many games have that, is just to split one of the ROMs on smaller ROMs. So like a sandwich of 3 PCBs for a single game. But once again, one of the PCB is common to all the games. So you don't, if you are an arcade operator, you don't need to You don't need to buy this one in extra. And of course, if you're an arcade operator, you're supposed never to open them. So you just have the plastic sandwich and you just put it in, and you never have to touch any electronic to switch a game. So basically, that's a video game how you would buy it as an arcade operator. And to make it easier, because arcade operator often had no electronic knowledge, then the connector is completely standard. It's a JAMA connector. I mean, no, that's wrong, but for video, etc., at least there was a standard, and it was really plug and play almost. So you have a sandwich of two PCBs. The colors changed for the regions. So Japanese and European. So of course you cannot swap. Here you have written USA. On mine it's written Europe. But they have regions. And the latest version of CPS2 was a single black PCBs that was all in one. So you don't have a system PCB that's common to the other one. But that's the end of the existence of CPS2. Anyway, hardware was probably cheaper. This hardware lasted 10 years. So basically, this is a close-up of the game ROM, with the game PCB, which contains the game and its protection. So everything that is in green is unencrypted, and everything that is in red is encrypted. So basically, the graphics and sound code and samples, so the sound data is in clear. So basically, it's the same format as CPS1, roughly CPS1 dash. So basically, you could just grab these graphics and create a fake visually, sound-wise, perfect. But in the code, data and code are together, and code is encrypted and data isn't. The code is encrypted with values with a key or something, encryption data is stored on SRAM, and this SRAM is battery powered. The pulse and the expression connector will play a role together, but they had no real importance in the game itself. I mean, they were just standard at the time. So when you say that code and data were on the same ROM encrypted, people usually with modern minds tend to think, oh, let's just fake that and and ask the system to decrypt code. Because like it was data, I mean, to swap code and data, and it will decrypt everything. Well, hard times. Remember, this was absolutely unscathed for like many years. And the thing is, this was done at CPU level. So when memory was fetched to be executed, it was decrypted on the fly. And when it's read, then it's not decrypted. It's coming clear. So you would be supposed not to be able to technically get that decrypted. Because the CPU won't allow. The outside the package of the CPU plus decryption will not let you get it decrypted. It's decrypted inside. And because it's 68K based, the pin that is responsible for fetching code, memory for code or data, it was actually not available from the outside. So basically, you wouldn't be able to influence the CPU and decrypt me the code. No, code comes in and is decrypted internally. So basically, you patch up codes, you get a black screen, back to zero. You have no idea what happened. Even the initial EIP and stack pointer are encrypted. So opcodes are encrypted. Stack pointer and PC are encrypted. You can see where the Ryu Chun-Li names. Yeah, happy. Yeah, graphics and sound are unclear, but emulating the games, yeah. So that's probably why CPS2 was really awesome. It was correctly protected. And it was absolutely unscathed for like 6 years. Luckily, Capcom will do some mistakes, mostly because of this. The Neo Geo was awesome. Plenty of great games. The Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, Samurai Shodown, King of Fighters, Metal Slug series. I could go on and on because Neo Geo really had an awesome set of video games. Very good, very long, very huge longevity from the 90s to 2004. Neo Geo was from the beginning open to third-party development. So, for example, games by Metal Slug were not developed by SNK, even though they were really good. On the other hand, some games were really bad. But still, Neo Geo was awesome, a lot of games, and similar in hardware, and also a success in arcade, but also as a very expensive console. So, knowing that the hardware was similar, that this was success in both cases, Well, Capcom tried, and they managed to make something that makes the Neo Geo look small and cheap. The CPS changer was basically older CPS 1 games that were re-released in CPS changer version. So the problem was that this was at the time of CPS 2. And it's really years old games, while Neo Geo would get month old or weeks old games. So basically there was a problem here, especially it was expensive. The only good thing was the joystick was awesome and was reusable on Super Nintendo via adapters for officially. So it was awesome joystick. Probably the best Super Nintendo arcade joystick you could get. But still very expensive, years old games. Neo Geo was still getting really hot in recent games, so CPS Changer was a failure. They tried as a last resort to port that game. So that's the CPS 2 game, encrypted. You see insert coin into the console version. Looks the same, except it's press start now, because it's a console game and not So basically it's the same game, except that the sound had to be downgraded to the CPS 1 version. So they took the CPS 2 game and they made a CPS 1 version. Big importance, this game is encrypted. This game wasn't. So you're like, ta-da, thank you. What happened that day? Nothing. We have no idea why, because CPS 2 was still absolutely unscathed, but absolutely nothing happened after that. I don't know why. Maybe people were, at the time, actually people were like, oh yeah, no one will ever hack a CPS 2. But still, it was like a myth that it will ever be emulated, but still, nothing happened. I don't know why. So here, CPS 2 game, 4 months later, a big leak of information, nothing happened. So, the dragon was still alive and undefeated. And to defeat a dragon, you need a team of heroes. So basically, this is where the story starts. And the CPS changer, the Street Fighter Zero changer ROM set was eventually dumped and available, so people could see, oh, it's a CPS 1. So first, it could be emulated because it's more or less a CPS 1 game. So suddenly, at least we had one CPS 2 games that was playable. It was not exactly the same, but we remember this sound was in clear in the CPS 2 version, so we could patch this sound back into this game. So basically, we had a perfect CPS 2 game, but it was not the protection was still absolutely undefeated. So, there was one guy who knows 68K very well, and he started just looking at the hardware, at the ROMs itself, just making assumptions, so being familiar with the code. And he eventually, luckily for us, or for him at the time, he was able to get this hardware quite cheap. The Japanese version of this game with the suicide battery and in a working state at home to do experiments. And also to dispel some myth, because of course people said that whenever you do this, your CPS 2 game would die instantly, and so there were plenty of rumors that he also had to guess if it was true or not. But anyway, he analyzed this and he makes some assumptions, and he eventually got the hardware to get this at home and to be able to experiment with it. Problem is. With all my respect, Razula is very good with Motorola CPU, but very bad with PC. So I joined him and I was on the PC side. So he was working on the stuff on the hardware itself. And whenever he needed some tool or something on the PC side, then I was providing it. So basically we were, the front and the back, front row and the back row. I don't know. Yeah, basically I was working on the PC, but remotely. We didn't work together. Yeah, I can put that. I was working front, I was working back. No? What's the English for that? Yeah. Yeah. He was in the foreground, I was in the background. No. Yeah, well, anyway. Trying to correct my English. So the first success of Razula was to enable the debugger that was integrated. It was disabled. Remember, he cannot patch an opcode. He's asleep. Yeah, it's okay. It's warm in here, and there's this guy talking with the same voice. So, once again, the first success of Razula was to enable the debugger that luckily was integrated in the Street Fighter in this game. So, by eventually finding out something that he could patch data-wise, then we would have the debugger output, even though we couldn't patch an opcode at the moment. But still, that was a huge progress because suddenly we were not blind anymore. That was the first patch the first patch, useful patch of CPS2, and it was in November 99. Protection is still alive and well, but at least it's a good progress. So then we were not blind anymore, and that was really helpful for the second step. So that's worth a good facepalm for Capcom. And basically once, by putting some data in the palette, Razula noticed that this code was, the data was executed, which is normal, but it was executed and encrypted. So it's worth a good facepalm, because you wonder why they had a perfectly working encryption that for some ranges of memory was disabled. So he found that. Luckily, thanks to the debugger output, you could see, hey, if I alter this, hey, wait a minute, this means the register changed. So this means my code was actually executed in plain text. That was really helpful for the next step. So suddenly, we could patch opcodes, and we could have execution on the CPS2. That's February 2000. Yeah, if I'm correct. So that's February 2000. So now we had a split second of execution because we didn't have all the execution we wanted on the hardware, but we could execute our own code on the CPS2. So shell code for a split moment of execution on the CPS2 in February 2000. There were other stuff required, and if you remember, we wouldn't be able to decrypt code. But Capcom made a second mistake, and there is one of the addressing mode of motor, the 68K, is relative to the program counter. So basically, you're reading data relative to the EIP. And it's not even clear in the official doc, but basically, at a low level, this means you read data, but you ask it to the bus as if it was code, because it's relative to code, so it's supposed to be nearby. So you read it like code, and suddenly you have a data read that is decrypted. So suddenly, that was July 2000. We could decrypt one word of data of a CPS2 for a split second of execution. But at least with each flip of the interrupter, we had one different double word. So I traveled for the first time and visited Razula. And Razula was on the hardware, flipping the switch, moving to the next value with the joystick. And I was writing down each word in Excel. We were double checking and going to the next value. We thought the algorithm would just die because it was, the algorithm of CPS1- was easy. So we thought that's going to be easy. But no. The algorithm we didn't find anything. And, so we felt a bit like lemmings. We didn't know if we were, that's why I put some lemmings. We didn't know if we were digging or building in the right or the wrong direction, but still, there was progress. We had decrypted data of the CPS2 for the first time, but the algorithm was smart enough so that we had no idea what it was. And the method was a bit slow, if you noticed. Like, I flipped the switch, he will read the value, and so on. Yeah, we tried a lot of possible things to make that faster, but we'll see about that. Of course, if you notice, that already lasted over more than a year. So to keep the faith, you need to work on side quests, it's like RPGs. And we also did a lot of funny stuff. So to just, keep memory fresh. So for example, that's the 68,000. This is a Japanese computer, which had a very good port of one of the CPS2 games. We studied it, hoping that there would be some leak of information. We didn't find anything. This is a CPS1 emulator that I not completely, but I reversed engineered with IDA and tried to inject new functionalities. So here we actually make it play, add new games and add different patches for the game injected in assembly. So a side project just to keep your business fresh. This is also one of the hardware we were using was updates were protected by zip passwords. And at the time it was the old format of zip password. So I wrote a tutorial on zip password cracking in 99. Yeah, it's edited in 2000. So at the time, zip password cracking was still new. So yeah, side quests just to keep your memory fresh and keep the faith, I'd say. But it's really important because probably would have given it's not like staring all the day at a Street Fighter Zero game or hearing the music. The music is still in my ear because I heard it for years. So it's haunting me. And you probably need to do just looking at IDA for the software for 6 months is refreshing compared to just hearing the same music all the time. So then, when was it? In December 2000, Razula was at these days more often working on a CPS2 version of the game of Street Fighter Zero because he had it at home. But then once he looked again at the Street Fighter Zero Challenger, so the console version that was unencrypted, and he found out this weird opcode in the code. I mean, he noticed, but this time he tried a bit further, and this opcode that does nothing meaningful in the game is actually the key that if this opcode is executed, the watchdog for the protection will stay alive, will not be triggered. So basically, decryption will keep on running. So basically, before we had a split second of execution, now we had unlimited execution on the CPS2 hardware. So we had shellcode for split execution. Now we had unlimited execution of foreign code in December 2000. So now we can automate dumping because we could decrypt and we have all the execution we want. We were really lucky because this was in Street Fighter Zero. But if you take one of the other game that has two versions, then in the CPS2 version, on the encrypted version, they took care of removing the key. So that's an unencrypted version that is extremely rare, and that's the encrypted version, but they didn't forget to remove the key. So we are really lucky it was still there because that gave us the key to unlimited code execution on the CPS2. So now we could actually dump. And how do you dump a video game? How do you dump a decrypted ROM when you have no knowledge about hardware? Well, it turns out that joysticks and the output, the ports of the CPS2 have the same voltage. So we just put some wires between those ports to the joystick port of the PC. And we started sending data. It didn't work. It wasn't extremely reliable. So we came up with our own protocol of checksum and parity. And because Razula and I were split in two different countries and debugging was not an option. So basically I still have this joystick. I debugged the protocol myself at home, making sure that my version would work. Bit parity, checksum, bit parity, and so on, making sure it worked the right way. And Razula did the same on his side. And so the CPS2 would send the data for 1 byte via its coin out and what's the name of coin out and I forgot the other one to the PC. 3 buttons at a time. I mean, like 3 bits. The PC, my program would read the joystick port, 30 buttons per second, because not too fast, because then the joystick port goes crazy. I mean, it's unreliable. And it receives the data for 1 byte. It checks that the checksum and whatever was correct. Then it updates the file that represents the file for one of the ROM content on the hard disk with increase the counter, which is monitored by the hardware of his EEPROM emulator that we saw here. And so basically the counter in the ROM running on the alive system is increased, and then the next byte is changed. So that's December 2000. We got in 4 hours the first decrypted dump of the CPS2 games. So now CPS2 emulation becomes a reality. Of course, we just get the same fucking old game, just with new sound, but we already patched that. So it was like, this game again. So for me, it was like, cool victory, but not so cool. So then at least that was a breakthrough, and that made the news. And as usual, the news got it wrong. The encryption scheme was not broken or smashed. Nothing was defeated. We just asked the game in a working state to decrypt itself nicely. But at least initially we had this, and suddenly we had this. Okay, great progress. The title color changed. But then very quickly now people start sending their hardware, and we had new games. And for me that was awesome. And this one in particular, Alien vs Predator, was sent by someone in a working state a few months later. And this game, Capcom had lost the IP for that game very quickly. So basically that game was never ported to any console. So that game was just lost. Because either you have a live CPS2 at home, either you cannot play it. No port of this game, CPS2 or nothing. So just getting this game to be decrypted by your joystick port at Razula's place with his program and my program enabled this game to be preserved for good, at least emulation-wise. And that was awesome because it's really a great game. So, was it game over for CPS2? Not exactly, but now emulation became a reality. That was good. Hate came. Like, why don't you release all the new games? Because we are in 2000, and some new games are still released in 2001. Sorry, and some new games are still released on CPS2. But at least emulation was a reality, and there was preservation. But decryption was still undefeated. And if you wanted to dump all the values of all combinations for the decryption for all the addresses, then it would took us, I think, 2,000 years. 200 years, which is a bit too long. So people say, why don't you release all the information? They didn't know it takes 4 hours to dump a game, which is reasonable, but still not so good when the actual encrypted pair address range is 8 gigabytes, which was huge at the time. I mean, even now it's still, you have rainbow tables bigger than that, but at the time, 8 gigabytes, it was still CD-ROM time. The years pass, and you also need some side quest to keep the brain fresh and etc. As I mentioned before, the manufacturer of the software for the EEPROM emulator that we were using, it was discontinued, and they were nice enough to give us the software for the driver. So we patched it to turn it into a genuine CPS2 shock dumping device, even though it was still by joystick port. But yeah, I mean, we got some more time. It was a bit faster and easier to use. So basically, I think we went down to 1 hour for dumping a CPS2 game, which is still better than nothing. And also we got some sponsors from Hanaho for the Hot Rods. So they also wanted, I'm not sure, they wanted to have the exclusivity because they were an arcade cabinet manufacturer, and also for PC games, like this is a PC joystick that we got. And they wanted to have the exclusivity of CPS2 emulation, but we said no, because as soon as you release the emulator, then people will just decrypt the data and make it open for free. We could have said so, but we just refused. And CPS2 emulation was free in main and everything. Similarly, the most recent Neo Geo games had protections, custom encryption and everything. And we just applied the same winning tactics, joystick dumping, with the custom interface done by Razula. And this was decrypted, dumped. We could do a decrypted dump within a few weeks with this technology. And this time the algorithm was weak and it was broken much quicker. Not by us, but still good. It was a good thing, and it was also using the same techniques to decrypt other games. Another thing is that if you had the CPS2 hardware so far, emulation is good, but your hardware will still die, and people still have dying boards at home. The thing is, if you would put, if the original working CPS2 game would have encrypted code and decrypted data, and if you decrypted the code, if you decrypt code and put them together and back on the CPS2 that was dead by battery, the game would not run. The Capcom didn't want his hardware to be reused, which is what happened with CPS1. With CPS1, the Kabuki chip just had a pin that if you cut it, it would turn it into a non-encrypted Z80. So if you just decrypt the protection data, then the game would run. So basically immortal and the same hardware reusable. And Capcom didn't want that to be possible. So just putting that, you still had a game that would not run anymore. And at the time, you had to pay $50 whenever you had a CPS2 game that was dead by battery. You would have to ship it overseas. Sorry, you have to get a CPS2 game restored. You have to ship it overseas at your own cost and pay an extra $50 just to have the battery replaced and the guarantee not voided. Of course, after some point, Capcom stopped supporting CPS2 repairs, so this game would die. And if you have your battery runs out, even though the games were emulated, then the game would die anyway, even if you own it and paid for it. And Razula found out. Razula did some great progress, and here the battery is missing, and yet you see that the game works. And he found out that the registers for the addresses for the video and sound were changed. So basically, the game was running, but no picture, no sound, which looks dead, but it's not at CPU level. So basically, by patching back by passing this occurrence of registers and making sure this memory range is not cleared, then you would have a game that would run forever. So you decrypt code, you make the difference between code and data in the same blob of data. You decrypt only the code, then you patch the code so that the offsets are different, the immediate values are different, and the ranges are not clear and everything. And then you get a game that will never die because it doesn't need a battery anymore. So one other very good thing that Raspberry did was a universal ROM that people with a dead board at home could burn and see if the board was dead by battery or dead for another reason. And then he made immortal version, he called them Phoenix, which the guy would just cut the battery, put this version on it, and he even added some options just for the fun. So now, people with the actual hardware at home who could have a CPS2 game that would never die, which was good for hardware owners. Of course, this enabled suddenly people to just use dead CPS2 hardware, so to make bootlegs. And this was initially Mega Man 2, and the bootleg is not really creative, it's Gigaman 2. So here, the ROMs have been replaced by another component. Okay, so you see suddenly real bootlegs, the battery is gone, and real bootlegs are possible now. And dead hardware is reusable. Some bootlegs were much better, and this one adds an extra PCBs of ROMs and an extra little one to hook the controls, and you have a hardware with one hardware you have a special combination and you can switch the game on the fly, which is really cool. Like you need just one CPS2 board and you can play all the games. That's really cool. So a better use of now the bootleg possibilities of CPS2. But also this is Alien vs Predator. I mean, it looks like Aliens, I think. And this is Aliens vs Predator. Two totally different games. But this one was not belonging to Capcom anymore. This one belonged to another IP. And we were sued for that. Because we were enabling this game to be played for free. I mean, we are not sued, but we had a takedown letter and everything. But you remember an IP doesn't apply to a specific game, it applies to name. And it was definitely a genuine Alien vs Predator game, even though there's an S here. But the lawyers didn't care, and we had a takedown letter because we were making possible to emulate this game. So our host cut the stuff, but we had some support. But that means, lawyers do their job. What do you want? But still, a bit frightening, a bit, reminding of how business works and everything. But still, it was a good memory, maybe now. Not a good memory from the host that cut us instantly, but a good memory from the people who offered new hosting instantly afterward, right after that. You know your friends after these kind of events. So now even the most obscure Japanese games were dumped because eventually someone would even send us the actual working hardware for these games, which you probably never heard of. These games are not even translated. They don't exist in English version. This one is bit more interesting. Battle Circuit, not so well known. It's the successor of Captain Commando, more or less. It's not so well known. It's actually good, but still, we needed someone to continue because CPS2 was far from being defeated. We could get all the games emulated, but the decryption was still alive. And when you cannot defeat your enemy, you call your friends. And this is where Charles McDonald comes in, and Charles McDonald is the Captain America of emulation. He doesn't know I'm calling him like this, or maybe he does now. But basically, you give him some hardware, he studies the hardware, he documents it, and he creates his own device to defeat the protection, he dumps decrypted data, and sometimes he even makes the emulator. So, he's awesome. And basically, this is Charles' personal device to black box PAL and extract the internal equations for memory mapping in this case. So basically, you're not able to read the internal configuration, but by black boxing, you just try all the combinations and you extract the inside equations. Yeah. So basically, he was able to take control of the memory mapping of the CPS2. So he already had more power, more control over what happens in the CPS2. And with that more control and his knowledge and experimenting, he came up with his own personal device dedicated for CPS2 dumping. And this time it was dumping from a CPS2 board directly via the expansion port to USB. So that's how he rolls. And this time he could dump 8 gigabytes, the 8 gigabytes of all the equation, of all the combinations of encryption, decryption in 17 hours compared to 2000 years. So he could dump the whole complete data range of the encryption. He did that for 3 games. Cool. You receive 24 gigabytes in a lot of CDs via the post because that's how it works at the time. And I stared at them for a long time and I was clueless because even if someone like Charles says awesome formulation, suddenly it's crypto. And yeah, you get 8 gigabytes of data. It doesn't compress at all. I mean, it was really good, strong. What do? Hey, well, you call someone else. You need someone, you need to continue and you need a new player needs to start. And that's where Nicolas Salmoria, the author of MAME, it's funny because he's on Twitter. The profile line is like Nicolas Salmoria, also the creator of MAME. And he has like 100 followers. So, titles and reality. So Nicolas Salmoria shrunk this to 4 gigabytes. And then with the help of a Spanish guy called Andreas Naive, they were able to eventually shrink the encryption key to 64 bits. So, I mean, and Andreas Naive is actually now, for me, the expert of you give him numbers, he finds the algorithm. Because he did, at the time he was not so well known, but he did that for other components. He's the one who defeated CPS3 encryption too. So you give him numbers, he does some experiments. He has a blog. I'll give you the links afterwards. I don't understand. Yeah, maybe I'm still not sure I actually understand it. Well, it's in Spanish. It doesn't help. But yeah, I mean, you give him numbers, he finds the algo, and that's really awesome. And eventually, they were able to shrink the 8 gigabytes of data to a 64-bit key. And after that, they were able to derive this key from the decrypted dump. So suddenly you have decrypted dump, and suddenly you only get the 64-bit key, and then you don't need the decrypted ROM anymore. You just need to apply the algo on the fly, and which means you can also patch back. So now this was helpful for this game, Ultimate Ecology. That's the Japanese version of Echo Fighter. The Japanese version is extremely rare. And probably, the Japanese collectors are keeping it alive, and they would never send it overseas, outside of Japan. But the European version was easy to find. It was already emulated. So basically, you have the European dump. You get the key, and then you can decrypt the Japanese version. And then many collectors in Japan were probably quite unhappy about that. Anyway, but still, it was really good. That also enabled. There was one Japanese hardcore guy. He's patching. So he made a patch to put better controls in that game. So he designed his own PCB and code to upgrade the controls of that game in particular. And I think he did that for the original version. So with the battery alive, because that's hard. That's Japanese hardcore. And this is good because now that the algorithm is known, as the key is known, then you can patch back on a working system. Okay, fair enough. Good stuff. I mean, that's an advanced hack that was made possible thanks to this. And one last thing is that this game, Rockman, was available on CPS2, was available on CPS1, sorry. And the CPS2 was extremely rare. It was more or less a prototype on CPS2. And so this is the other game that was available in an unencrypted and encrypted version. But this version is extremely rare. So it is like one known copy of it. I mean, version of the hardware in a working state. The guy dumped this. So he just dumped. He would never ship it or give it, of course. But then that was the last attack on CPS1 made by Dave Haywood. Basically, it was a fuzzy plaintext attack on CPS2 encryption. And basically, with just the encrypted dump, he was able to get the key, and then just the decrypted dump of that game gets the key. Just with the encrypted dump of that game, get the key and then decrypt the game. So now CPS2 was, you could emulate the preserve CPS2 just having one encrypted dump, even if the key was never known and the hardware was dead, which is really cool. And that enabled the last CPS2 game to be emulated. That's really cool. So, conclusion? Any questions at this point? He woke up?
When was that hardware where the guy dumped it via USB? In which year?
2005.
Oh.
So, from the moment where CPS2, we got a CPS2 emulated and dumped by joystick in 2001 and 2005, just people send PCBs. People insult us and threaten us because they want the latest game. Same, yeah, jailbreak business. And Charles was busy on other hardware at the time. Although at the same time, roughly, Bubble was emulated. So, it's not like nothing happened in the emulation. So, yeah, at the moment where we tried some stuff to dump faster, but that would never work anyway. I mean, we're not Charles level. So it was, I'd say, pretty quick when Charles did his part. Oh, well, he got pretty quickly to I dumped the whole 8 gigabytes by USB because he had done that already before with other hardware. That's how he rolled. But still, so that's what explained the delays. It's not like Charles worked on it immediately after. And of course, then the magic of Nicola and Andreas on encryption that I cannot explain, but they are really good at this. So, conclusion. To summarize the weaknesses and the mistakes from Capcom, to have provided an encrypted version of one of the encrypted game. This game still had a debugger inside. So Street Fighter 0 in 95 had a debugger, while the first CPS2 games, Super Street Fighter in 93, didn't have a debugger inside. The whole mistake of the range of memory that's running unencrypted is available on all the CPS2 games. Still not sure why they did that. And the fact that they left decryption work on addressing mode. We will see that later. Sega had a similar hardware with the same protection. They knew about this weakness, and in their hardware, the decryption would return garbage when memory was read via addressing mode. And of course, the key leak via the unencrypted version of Street Fighter 0. So all those mistakes were really hidden for a hardware that was absolutely unscathed for 6 years. And it was only emulated in 2001, so like 9 years of being undefeated and possible to play these games for free for like 9 years. That's good for protection. Overall, we did some really clumsy hacks sometimes. It was a joint effort by people with very different backgrounds. 68K, PC, crypto, hardware. But it was not a team, an official team or anything, but it was a joint effort and a good success. And many other contributions. Of course, that's really important. People sending us ROMs, PCBs, sending us money, giving us support. And the other people hating you and sending bullshit on the forums to make you feel stronger and everything. Sometimes, to be honest, the moment we wanted to give up was after the CPS2 decryption was a reality and we had so much hate and release all the games for free, we'll censor that on the video. But it was the moment we wanted to give up. Because initially nobody cared, and then when you show, it's like Ionic and Jailbreaks, you receive a lot of hate for that. But overall, it was a great success, and that's the cool part. The game was emulated, resurrectable, defeated, bootlegs, and everything dumped. So that was clearly an awesome victory. And it was, sometimes it was very difficult, but that was clearly awesome victory. Not a perfect victory, because to put the game back on a dead board, we had to patch them. And Japanese collectors wouldn't allow that. And it's only a few years ago that the original hardware that was used by Capcom to reprogram this surfaced. So it was kept unknown for many years. So it was just a personal assistant, the standard personal assistant with here Super Street Fighter 2 security data card for Mexico. Because Mexico was one of the region. And this only appeared a few years ago, but now neither Razula nor I are working on CPS2, so I guess CPS2 will never be resurrected in original state, but at least it's fully playable and preserved for good. A few other things. This is a few. You may wonder how no one's leaked a secret about this, because nowadays secret leaks happen all the time, slowly, or encryption wise. But there was absolutely no leak of CPS2 protection ever. And people speculated that it was because the protection was entirely done by a separate company. And funny thing, there's Naomi, which was a Sega system, so running those games, had a similar protection. While it's Sega, it was Capcom for CPS2, and now it's Sega for Naomi. And here you have an extra, and the knowledge for CPS2 apparently helped to defeat the Naomi. And here you have a specific device dumping the encrypted, the DS key. So this time it's a real encryption algorithm. It was not a custom one. I mean, it was a standard custom encryption algorithm, dumping from a Naomi dongle, security dongle, and still connected to a Naomi, just so that the initialization exchange is realistic. Also, very nice, the CPS3 that you saw earlier with the battery and with the custom SH2. One guy called Darksoft resurrected CPS3 for good. Andreas Naive defeated CPS3 encryption, but CPS3 hardware resurrection was actually harder and not so worth it because you only have 3 series of games on it. So CPS2 had plenty of great games. CPS3 it was not so interesting, but it's very good that Darksoft was able to put to resurrect completely the hardware. So with just one CPS3 that you have to modify this time by putting a custom CPU, a standard CPU on it, then you can have all the games playable for good. So this is also very good. And a similar, Razula was known afterwards. So he did a kind of super BIOS for the Neo Geo, adding a lot of options, a bit like he did for the Phoenix, but this time even more. And now he even did that for the Neo Geo CD. And I think some people even made Neo Geo CD was famous for loading slowly. And you can make Neo Geo CD games loading faster by sending them directly via joystick port of the Neo Geo. So you send the data of the game to the custom BIOS so that the game doesn't load via the CD-ROM drive speed 1, if that recalls something. Faster by the joystick port. This is not related to any of the stories here, but this hardware is very important. This is a Konami bubble memory. So this is all hardware for use for Twin Bee and Gradius. And this was using a very fragile form of memory. Most of this hardware are dead, like bubble memory system was really weak. And when you boot the system, it needs to warm up to a certain temperature. This countdown takes 6 minutes in winter, apparently. And for me, this countdown shows this hardware are going to die if we don't do anything to preserve them. And it's only because people send money, donate hardware, donate money that this game can be preserved and dumped in the working state before the bubble memory is, because it was very fragile and clears. And then these games are lost for good. So warming up countdown, but also the countdown to the extinction of all those games if they are not hacked and preserved. And it's only thanks to the effort of hackers, but also to donators. Some links related to CPS2 Shock, which was Razula and I, and Charles Nicolas. The notes, at the time, Andreas was still keeping a blog in Spanish about his how he proceed to decrypt CPS2 eventually, and now the source. Now MAME is on GitHub. And Darksoft now is working on very nice hardware projects, like he resurrecting the CPS3 correctly, and now going further, STV all-in-one, and maybe CPS2 all-in-one, sure, now. Have any questions? You notice it's a CPS2 timeline. The last game and the first one. And this is where the... Oops, can I... Yeah. No, can I? Yeah. This is where my screensaver kicks in. That's why you need 5 gigabytes of screensaver. There's random videos of games. In the past, at one point I had played all MAME games, and I made a small video recording of all of them. That gives you a 5 gigabyte. You have the sound. Yeah, it's memories. No. I'm trying to get one that has a cool sound. Ah, yeah, I was trying to get one. Oh, yeah, this one. Maybe there we. Any questions? You have another Club Mate, please? But that's the end of my talk. And I hope you liked it.